Jamal was used to long, tiring days. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, put on his worn-out sneakers, and rushed out to start his shift as a courier. His job was simple: deliver packages across the city. But the struggle behind it was anything but easy. The city was full of noise, traffic, and impatient people. He carried boxes up endless staircases, ran through narrow streets, and often skipped meals just to stay on schedule. Despite the hardships, Jamal never complained. He had dreams, big dreams, of one day owning his own delivery service, maybe even a small logistics company. But for now, he had to survive. His small apartment barely had space to stretch out, and most of his earnings went into rent and food. Life was tough, but Jamal had learned to fight through it. One evening, just as the sun was setting, Jamal received his last delivery for the day. The package was small, and the address led him to an upscale neighborhood, one he could never imagine living in. The houses were huge, with expensive cars parked outside, and the streets were quiet, unlike the crowded areas he usually worked in. As he approached the house, he noticed something unusual. A black luxury car was parked near a dark alleyway. Its headlights were off, and the windows were tinted. It wasn't normal for a car like that to just sit there, especially in a place like this. Jamal felt a strange feeling in his gut, but he shook it off. He had a delivery to make. Just as he was about to ring the doorbell, a sound caught his attention. It was faint, but it was there, a muffled cry, like someone struggling to call for help. Jamal froze, his heart pounding. He turned his head toward the alley and listened. The sound came again, this time clearer. It was a woman's voice. Something was wrong. Jamal took a hesitant step forward, peering into the dark alley. That's when he saw them. Two men, dressed in dark clothes, were gripping a woman by her arms. She was struggling, trying to fight them off. But they were stronger. One of them had his hand over her mouth, muffling her screams. The other was trying to yank a purse from her shoulder. Jamal's mind raced. He had no weapon, no backup. He was just a courier, but something inside him refused to walk away. Without thinking, he dropped his delivery bag and sprinted toward them. "Hey, let her go," he shouted, his voice firm and loud enough to echo. The two men turned, surprised by his sudden presence. For a brief second, their grip loosened, giving the woman a chance to break free. She stumbled back, gasping for breath. Jamal clenched his fists, ready for whatever came next. He had no idea that this single act of courage would change his life forever. The two men glared at Jamal, their eyes filled with anger. One of them clenched his fists, stepping forward aggressively, while the other quickly scanned the surroundings, checking if anyone else was nearby. Jamal felt his heart hammering in his chest, but he stood his ground. He knew he was alone, but he couldn't let fear stop him now. The woman, still gasping for breath, stumbled backward, her wide blue eyes filled with shock and fear. She looked at Jamal, then at the two men, as if unsure whether to run or stay. "Mind your own business," one of the attackers growled, his voice low and threatening. Jamal swallowed hard. He knew he wasn't the strongest guy around, but he had grown up in tough neighborhoods. He had seen enough to know that fear only made things worse. He took a deep breath and spoke, keeping his voice steady. "Let her go. Now." The men exchanged glances. They had expected an easy target, not someone willing to fight back. One of them suddenly lunged at Jamal, swinging his fist toward his face. Jamal ducked just in time. The punch missed, but the attacker quickly recovered, grabbing Jamal's jacket and trying to push him against the wall. Jamal struggled, using all his strength to break free. He pushed back, knocking the man off balance. The second attacker tried to grab Jamal from behind, but before he could, the woman acted. Gathering her courage, she picked up a nearby trash can lid and slammed it against the back of the man's head. He let out a grunt and stumbled forward, giving Jamal just enough time to twist out of the first attacker's grip. Realizing that things weren't going their way, The two men hesitated. They glanced at each other, then at the woman, who was now gripping the trash can lid tightly, ready to swing again if needed. A car passed by the alley, its headlights briefly illuminating the scene. The attackers didn't wait any longer. With an angry curse, they turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Jamal stood there, his breathing heavy, his hands still clenched into fists. His whole body was shaking, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline. He turned to the woman, who was staring at him in disbelief. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. The woman nodded slowly, still trying to catch her breath. I think so," she whispered. Jamal looked at her properly for the first time. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with elegant features and long, wavy blonde hair. Her dress was expensive, her shoes polished. She was clearly from a world far different from his. But at that moment, none of that mattered. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. You saved me." Jamal exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Anyone would have done the same. The woman shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "Not everyone would have." And neither of them knew that this moment would change both of their lives forever. Jamal winced as he touched his side. His ribs ached from the struggle, and his knuckles were sore from the brief fight. He hadn't realized how much the adrenaline had been keeping the pain away until now. The woman, still catching her breath, noticed his discomfort. "You're hurt," she said, concern flashing in her eyes. Jamal shrugged. "It's nothing. I've had worse." But the woman wasn't convinced. "Come with me. I can't just let you walk away like this." Jamal hesitated. He wasn't used to people offering him help. Usually, it was the other way around. He was the one struggling, working, pushing forward without expecting kindness from strangers. "I'm fine," he insisted, trying to wave it off. The woman frowned. "You just saved my life. The least I can do is make sure you're okay." Before he could argue further, she stepped closer and gently took his wrist, urging him toward the street. For a second, Jamal thought about pulling away, but there was something in her expression, gratitude, sincerity, that made him stop resisting. She led him to a sleek, black luxury car parked nearby. The driver, a middle-aged man in a suit, rushed out when he saw her. "Miss Claire, are you all right?" Claire, that was her name. "I'm fine, Albert," she said quickly. "But he's hurt. We need to take him to the hospital." Jamal's eyes widened. No, I can't afford that." Claire cut him off. "You don't have to. I'll take care of it." Jamal wanted to argue, but the truth was, he was feeling dizzy now. The fight had drained him more than he thought. His legs felt heavier, and his side throbbed sharply. Before he could say anything else, the driver had already opened the car door. "Please," Claire said softly. Jamal sighed and climbed in. The seats were soft, far more comfortable than anything he had ever sat on. As the car pulled away, he glanced out the window, watching the city lights blur past. He wasn't used to this, riding in expensive cars, being treated like he mattered. Claire looked at him again. "What's your name?" "Jamal," he answered. "Jamal," she repeated, as if testing how it sounded. Then she smiled. "Well, Jamal, I owe you my life, and I don't take that lightly." He chuckled weakly. "I was just in the right place at the right time." She shook her head. "No, you made a choice. A lot of people would have just walked away." Jamal didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. For the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar, something he had long forgotten. Hope. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and clean sheets. Jamal sat on the edge of the hospital bed, feeling awkward as the nurse finished wrapping a bandage around his side. It wasn't a serious injury, just a few bruises and a shallow cut on his arm. But Claire had insisted he get checked. "You're lucky," the nurse said. "A little rest, and you'll be fine." Jamal nodded, though he wasn't used to resting. His life had never allowed him that luxury. He glanced toward the doorway, where Claire stood, waiting for the nurse to leave. Once they were alone, she stepped inside. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I just fought two guys in an alley," Jamal said, half smiling. Claire chuckled, then her expression turned serious. "Listen, I meant what I said in the car. I owe you my life, Jamal. I don't just want to say thank you and move on." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to do anything. I didn't help you for a reward." "I know," Claire said. "That's exactly why I want to help you." Jamal wasn't sure what she meant. People didn't usually go out of their way for someone like him. He was used to struggling alone. But Claire wasn't like most people. She sat down in the chair next to his bed. "I don't know much about you yet, but I can tell you're hardworking. You put yourself in danger to save me without thinking twice. That says a lot about the kind of person you are." Jamal shrugged. "Just trying to do the right thing." Claire smiled. "And that's rare these days." There was a short silence before she continued. "I want to help you, Jamal. I don't mean just covering your hospital bill. I mean something bigger." Jamal looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Claire took a deep breath. "My father owns a business. A big one. He's always looking for smart, hardworking people. If you're interested, I can introduce you to him." Jamal blinked. He had spent his whole life delivering packages, running from one place to another just to survive. The idea of working in an actual company, let alone one owned by a wealthy businessman, seemed like something from a different world. "You don't have to decide right away," Claire said quickly, sensing his hesitation. "But at least meet him. Talk to him." Jamal thought about it. He had been struggling for so long, dreaming of something better, but never knowing how to reach it. And now, out of nowhere, an opportunity had appeared. He looked at Claire, still unsure but feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "All right," he finally said. "I'll meet him." Claire's smile widened. "Good. I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you, Jamal." And she had no idea how right she was. The next morning, Jamal woke up feeling different. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about where his next meal would come from or how many deliveries he needed to make to cover his rent. Instead, his mind was filled with uncertainty and hope. Claire had arranged for him to meet her father that afternoon. Jamal had never been inside a corporate office before, let alone one belonging to a wealthy businessman. He wasn't sure what to expect. He knew how people from different backgrounds looked at him, with doubt, sometimes even with judgment. Would Claire's father be the same? By noon, Jamal stood in front of a tall glass building in the heart of the city. He hesitated before stepping inside. The security guard at the front desk eyed him suspiciously. "Can I help you?" the guard asked. I have a meeting with Mr. Whitmore," Jamal said, shifting nervously. The guard looked doubtful until Claire appeared from the elevator. "Jamal, you're here," she said brightly, walking up to him. She turned to the guard. "He's with me." The guard immediately nodded, stepping aside. Jamal followed Claire, trying to shake off his nerves. Inside, everything was luxurious. Polished floors, modern furniture, and employees dressed in suits. Jamal suddenly felt out of place in his simple clothes, but he reminded himself why he was here. Claire led him to a large office where a man in his late 50s sat behind a massive desk. His hair was neatly combed back, and his sharp eyes studied Jamal as he entered. "Father, this is Jamal," Claire said. "He's the one who saved me." Mr. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. "So, you're the young man my daughter won't stop talking about." Jamal stood straight. "Yes, sir." Mr. Whitmore observed him for a moment before speaking. "I appreciate what you did for my daughter. Not many would have risked themselves like that. But let's get to the point. Claire tells me you work as a courier. What do you want in life?" Jamal hesitated. No one had ever asked him that question before, not like this. I want more than just struggling to survive," he admitted. "I want to build something of my own. A business, maybe. Something that gives me a future. Mr. Whitmore nodded, impressed by his honesty. That takes hard work, intelligence, and the right opportunities. Claire believes in you. I want to see for myself what you're capable of. Jamal listened intently as Mr. Whitmore continued. I can offer you a position here. A chance to prove yourself. It won't be easy. People will doubt you. But if you're willing to work, you might just surprise them. Jamal's heart pounded. This was it. The chance he never thought he'd get. I'm ready, he said firmly. Mr. Whitmore smiled slightly. Good. Then let's see what you can do. Jamal's first day at the company was nothing like he had imagined. He expected a warm welcome, maybe some friendly introductions. Instead, as soon as he walked into the office, he could feel the stares. Employees whispered among themselves, exchanging glances as he passed by. He could almost hear their thoughts. Who is this guy? Why is he here? Dressed in simple clothes, Jamal felt like an outsider in a world of expensive suits and polished shoes. But he reminded himself why he was here. This was his chance. He had worked hard his whole life, and he wasn't about to let doubt or judgment stop him. Claire had arranged for him to work under a senior manager, Mr. Davidson, in the logistics department. It was an entry-level position, but Jamal didn't mind. He was here to learn and prove himself. Listen, kid, Mr. Davidson said on his first day. I don't know why Mr. Whitmore hired you, but this isn't a charity. You want to stay. Work hard, and don't expect special treatment. Jamal nodded firmly. I wouldn't want it any other way. And so, he got to work. The job wasn't easy. He had to handle shipments, organize deliveries, track inventory, and solve unexpected issues that came up every day. But unlike his courier job, this was different. Here, he was learning about the business side of things, seeing how everything connected. It was challenging but exciting. However, not everyone was happy about his presence. Some employees, especially those who had been there for years, didn't believe he belonged. They whispered behind his back. Some even tried to make his work harder by giving him the most difficult tasks. One afternoon, while he was checking inventory records, two employees, Mark and Jason, walked up to him. Hey, courier boy, Mark smirked. How does it feel working here instead of running around the city? Jamal didn't react. He had dealt with worse. Jason crossed his arms. You should know, people don't just get jobs here without connections. You think Claire brought you in because of your talent. Jamal clenched his jaw, but kept his voice steady. I don't need anyone to hand me anything. I'll prove my worth with my work. Mark laughed. We'll see about that. Jamal ignored them and went back to work. He knew that words wouldn't prove anything. Only results would. Days turned into weeks, and slowly things changed. Jamal started understanding the business better, finding new ways to improve operations, and even solving problems faster than his colleagues. One day, a major shipment went missing, and no one could figure out where it had gone. Jamal spent the entire night analyzing records, tracking movements, and by morning, he had found the error, saving the company from a huge loss. When Mr. Whitmore heard about it, he simply smiled. Looks like I made the right decision, he said. For the first time, Jamal felt like he truly belonged. Jamal had always believed that hard work speaks louder than words, and now he was finally seeing the results. After weeks of proving himself, people in the office had started noticing him, not as an outsider, but as someone who could get things done. Even Mr. Whitmore had acknowledged his efforts, but there were still some who didn't like his success. Mark and Jason, the same men who had mocked him before, now watched in silence whenever Jamal solved a problem faster than them. They couldn't deny it. He was good at what he did. One evening, as Jamal packed up his things, Claire walked into the office with a smile. You're making quite a name for yourself, she said. Jamal chuckled. Not everyone thinks so. Claire rolled her eyes. Forget them. My father doesn't just praise anyone. If he's impressed, it means you're doing something right. Jamal felt a warm sense of pride at her words, but as much as he was grateful for the opportunity, there was something else he hadn't told Claire, something that had been growing inside him. His feelings for her. From the day she had helped him, he had admired her kindness. But as they spent more time together, those feelings had deepened. She wasn't just a rich businessman's daughter. She was genuine, thoughtful, and strong-willed. But Jamal knew the reality. She was from a different world, a world where people like him didn't fit in. No matter how much he succeeded at work, he couldn't change who he was. Jamal, Claire said suddenly, pulling him from his thoughts. Would you like to have dinner with me? His heart skipped a beat. Dinner. She nodded. Yes, to celebrate your progress. You deserve it. Jamal hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but something inside him held him back. What would people say? What would her father think? Sensing his hesitation, Claire sighed. You know, you don't always have to prove yourself, Jamal. Sometimes it's okay to just enjoy life. Jamal looked into her eyes and realized she meant every word. For once, he decided to stop overthinking. All right, he said with a smile. Dinner sounds good. Claire grinned. Great, let's go. As they walked out together, Mark and Jason watched from a distance, their faces filled with disbelief and jealousy. Looks like Courier Boy is moving up in the world, Jason muttered. Mark narrowed his eyes. Let's see how long that lasts. But Jamal didn't care. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. The restaurant was unlike any place Jamal had ever been to. Soft lighting, elegant decor, and waiters dressed in black suits moved gracefully between tables. He felt a little out of place at first, but Claire made it easy. Relax, Jamal, she said with a smile. It's just dinner. He took a deep breath and nodded. Yeah, just dinner. As they ate, they talked about many things. Work, life, dreams. Jamal shared his vision of one day starting his own business, and Claire listened with genuine interest. You'll do it, she said confidently. I have no doubt. Jamal chuckled. You believe in me more than I believe in myself. Someone has to, Claire replied playfully. The evening passed quickly, and by the time they stepped outside, the city lights sparkled around them. The air was cool, and for the first time in a long while, Jamal wasn't thinking about survival. He was simply enjoying the moment. As they walked to the car, Claire hesitated before turning to him. Jamal, I want you to know something. He looked at her, waiting. She took a breath. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what people think. I care about who you are. Jamal's heart pounded. He had spent his life believing that people from different worlds never truly connected. But here she was, breaking every expectation he had. He struggled to find the right words. Claire smiled. You don't have to say anything now. Just think about it. Jamal nodded, feeling a warmth he couldn't explain. The next morning at work, things took a surprising turn. Mr. Whitmore called him into his office. I've been watching your progress, Jamal, he said, tapping a folder on his desk. You're hardworking, smart, and you've saved this company from big losses. Jamal stood straight, waiting. I think you're ready for a bigger role, Mr. Whitmore continued. How would you feel about leading a team in our logistics department? Jamal's eyes widened. A promotion. Already? I'd be honored, sir, he said, keeping his voice steady despite the excitement in his chest. Good, Mr. Whitmore said with a nod. I expect great things from you. As Jamal walked out of the office, the reality of everything hit him. Just a few weeks ago, he was a courier, struggling to make ends meet. Now he had a stable job, respect, and a future filled with possibilities. And maybe, just maybe, something more with Claire. As he sat at his desk, he smiled to himself. One act of courage had changed everything. And this was only the beginning.